Anyway, let's talk about gut types. Real briefly, this category is called the gut types. And what this means is that we experience the world through our instincts. We have really a core rooted set of instincts that we tend to view everything through. And at our best, we will use our energy to initiate and create a better world. At our worst, everything annoys us.
Everything.
Everything. And in my notes, I've actually got that in bold caps. Everything annoys us. As a whole, we actually tend to avoid emotions and we mainly show anger because of our gut instincts and the way we deal with them internally. By the time they come on the outside, it's usually expressed
differently.
Yes. And so, uh, so anyway, we do tend to avoid emotions. We do tend to show anger. Eights and ones, we tend to externalize ours. We tend to focus that outward. Nines, they suppress and internalize it till it goes
boom.
And then when it goes boom, everybody's like, where did that come from? I didn't see that coming, et cetera, et cetera. So we all tend to deal with it in different ways. One of the things that I think is important for gut types is we tend to ride, and I love the way it's described here as waves of intensity.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, we tend to be super intense and then not so much. Super intense and not so much. And the way that we handle that is quite differently. So when things get really tense and it seems to overwhelm us, eights, we will tend normally to hit back. But since I'm an Anabaptist, I'm a man of peace, it's a passive-aggressive punch.
Right, which is just the best kind.
Exactly. Nines tend to back off, and ones, they want to fix it. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so that's just a little bit about the general category of the gut types, the instinctual types. And I'm going to turn it over to Brendan now to talk about eights. And I'm going to stare at him intensely while he does it.
There you go. Everyone can be in prayer for me this week. I'm so glad that it's a short week with the holiday in it because I feel like it's going to be a little tense. But let's see how this goes.
It's all good, man. Go for it.
So, challengers.
Yes.
Eights are challengers. And one of the individuals we might associate scripturally with this would be John the Baptist. He was a challenger. He definitely bucked the norm.
Yes.
He went against society and the trends very hard, right? He wanted to create something new, right? He was very excited to do that. And so when we look at eights, their source of strength, it comes from this determination and this initiating and intimidating force. There's a drive that all eights have that other types maybe just don't identify with as much.
Okay.
It's the reason why it's so easy to identify leaders. Mm-hmm. When you think of people in your life that just are always at the forefront of whatever is going on, why is that? It's because they have this internal drive, this force that is just pushing them to a different place. And that's a huge benefit for eights as challengers. And more than any other type, they stand alone. They can stand by themselves. Mm-hmm. You'll identify eights because they have no problem being somewhere where no one else wants to be, right? They have no problem standing alone by themselves and taking charge, right? They're that domineering, very confident. They will move forward past any obstacle, and they're going to help other people move past those obstacles as well, right?
If not, we kill them.
There you go.
I'm just playing.
In a non-violent Mennonite way.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely.
Go. So what else encompasses a challenger? Well, they often refuse to give in to social convention, right? They're going to be a little bit stubborn in that way, and they can defy this sense of fear that dwells in them. They can defy the sense of shame and concern about the consequences of their actions. And so that's where this driving force behind them is not only such a strength, but it can be a bit of a weakness as well. Because if they choose to defy those signals, they're going to ignore the pitfalls that are in front of them.
Right.
And that's why so often, especially in our society today, we've seen so many leaders fall into traps.
Yep.
Right? Fall on their face. Not because they're innately different than everyone else. It's because their driving force pushes them to ignore the pitfalls that are going to be in their way.
And
they're
that,
so focused.
And that default thought, this won't happen to me because I'm stronger
Exactly.
than that or more. Yeah, exactly.
That's not me. I'm different.
Exactly.
Right? And so they drive, they keep going. And they're also usually unaware of what people think of them, right? They are usually aware of what people think of them, but they don't let that awareness alter their motivation.
Right.
So they are keenly aware that gut instinct, they'll be able to pan a crowd and tell, all right, here's what I'm getting from them, right? This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm able to learn from visual cues, from emotional cues, all that stuff. Their gut instinct is going to be really good at reading a space. But they don't allow that to change where they're going to drive and motivate them towards. Does that make sense?
It does.
Cool. Ready for the good stuff on eights?
It
gets really good. It gets really good. So eights are against everything.
Yes.
They don't like conventional norms, right? We mentioned that a little bit. And I kind of want to talk about this a little bit because...
Is that where my love of politicians comes from?
It must be,
It
Shane.
must be.
It
Yes,
must be.
yes.
So Shanes are against everything. And they're not emotional, but they do have this very impassioned core. So how does that play out? If they're not emotional, but they have an impassioned core, that might seem like a contradiction. But they're rooted in these deep-seated convictions. Eights, because they follow their gut, they're so ingrained in, I believe this so strongly and so firmly that they operate out of that place. And that's kind of where they return to. Anytime there's a little bit of self-doubt that begins to creep up for an eight, they return to that place and they get so much drive and momentum from there that then they go back out. And so they have this very rooted, convicted core. And eights want justice. So this comes from their fear, it comes from their source of strength, and it comes from their desire to buck conventional norms. So they want to see something different. They want to see justice, they want to see change, they want to see something that doesn't exist currently.
Right.
And that makes sense, right? Because if we think of the leaders in our world, if we think of those that have been very successful in changing different spaces, those leaders had such a drive and they saw something that others didn't. And so eights, like we mentioned when we talked about this last week, and even the week before, eights can benefit from a lot of other types to drive their vision.
Yes.
Right? And so eights are the ones that are actually going to execute that.
So in a healthy way, eights see that they do need people to go where this drive is taking them. And kind of in an unhealthy way, we would just be like, forget it, I'm going there anyway.
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
So the functions of self-assertion and leadership would be prevalent in an eight, in a challenger. Right? So they have this potential for self-confidence, self-determination. They can rely on themselves. They don't rely on a lot of other individuals. And they have the ability to take personal initiative and, again, just drive them wherever they want to go, right? They might drag people with them, but if they can't, that's not going to stop them. They're just going to go there themselves. And on a negative side, they also have the potential for the domination of others, right?
Absolutely.
Again, I'm just going to drag people with me because I'm going to challenge them and I'm going to get them there. I know as a challenger that place over there is better. So I'm going to bring them. And once they get there, they're going to thank me.
Which is quite funny because I often say to people, or us as pastors, I'll say, I don't care what they want. We're leading them to a place they don't even know exists.
Exactly. And that's an eight.
Exactly.
Right? And so they do have this potential for the dominations of others. But that can come out in this type of crude insensitivity where eights are seen as not really, again, reading the room. They do internalize it, but they don't do a good job of always verbalizing that. And so they can have this combativeness, this ruthlessness that is seen as almost a domineering personality, right? That can be a put-off for especially a lot of the heart types that go, oh, I don't know about that.
So you're a heart type.
I'm a heart type.
Dude, do I put you off, man?
Sometimes. Told you, this is going to get real fun. This is going to get real fun. So there is one parable that I wanted to share for the eights. So as an eight, it's actually the parable of the sower and the seed. And it highlights something that healthy eights should really seek to encounter in their own life. So in the parable, we are told, right, there's seed that has been thrown on a field, but weeds are also, enemies come and they throw weeds on the field, right? Weed seeds. And so weeds and grain stalks are growing side by side with one another. And what Jesus communicates in this parable is immense wisdom, right? What does he say? He says to the servants, don't go out and get rid of the weeds. Don't go out and get rid of the wheat. Don't go out and touch anything. What is he communicating by that? He's saying, be patient. Just wait, because he instructs them, wait for the weeds to grow, wait for the grain to grow. Then, after they've grown, so he's talking a harvest season. This is in planting season, and we have to wait all the way to the harvest season to say, then go grab the weeds, bundle them, and burn them. And at that stage, you can grab all the grain with no impact, right? They're not going to be tainted by the weeds that have grown. And for eights, the struggle is because they see a problem or they see something and they just want to go get it.
Yep.
And in doing so, they can sometimes cause more harm than good, right?
And I guess that's the reason why my favorite character is the Hulk, right? Like
you identify with him quite well.
I do. I actually have a little figure of him in my office.
There you go.
Yes.
So we would say that eights, they want justice, but the struggle is they will settle for revenge.
Yes.
So if they can't get justice, they will find a pound of flesh. They will get something, because if they don't get something, they haven't accomplished anything, and they haven't actually been able to get to the place that they've gone. So they will settle for revenge. So for eights, when they're disintegrating, when they're moving in an unhealthy way, when stress is filling their life, they suddenly become secretive and fearful, like a lot of fives. That internalizing mentality dominates themselves, and they kind of hide away. But when they move in integration, when they're moving in growth, eights are maybe the most powerful type of all, because they, like twos, become open-hearted and caring. When you're really healthy, you become like me. Right?
I'm so happy I'm like you, man.
Doesn't that fill you with joy,
You and
Shane?
Tony just fills me with joy.
Yeah, and Tony.
If I could just
Tony's
have your
a two.
hair, I would be better, man.
Well, not everyone can. That's unfortunate.
Exactly.
So
Well,
eights. What do you think of eights?
Well, the interesting thing is, I think, just looking at, really my own life and my own struggles, I think it's been interesting that I've had people who have recognized when I moved to the place of disintegration. Because they will actually say to me, Shane, where are you? Why are you not responding? Why are you not wanting to meet? Why? Because we tend to want to pull away from it all, right?
Yep.
And we don't feel safe to engage until we've figured something out to go tackle again, right?
Yep.
And so I do think it's interesting, and again, that makes me even more appreciative of the relationships that I have with people, that they can feel the freedom to say, hey, man, you're moving in an unhealthy place, and we know that you're there.
Right.
So come on out.
Exactly.
So I do feel like that's really important. But I do think, and just pausing as a moment as a pastor, I do think this is important for maybe people to understand me a little better, right? Because this thing you were talking about earlier, this core-rooted value, this idea that we're impassioned by, I can definitely say that I feel like Jesus has given me an idea for what the church community should look like. And in the past, I would be like, I could care less who goes with me. I'm still going.
Right.
Now my mindset has changed. I'm still going, but I want to take as many people with me, but we are going.
Right.
Right? You know what I'm saying? And so I think for people to understand that that's just the way I operate, right?
And the benefit, again, when we think about how much of a driving force eights can be, again, if they just follow their default mentality, they're going to go alone. And the issue becomes, once they get there, what do they have? When we talk about, this goes back to our very first week, when we look at the Enneagram, it really is talking about the body of Christ and every function, every part having a purpose. For eights to drive to a place of change, once they get there, they need to have ones and twos, and they need every part of the body with them to accomplish that goal, to the greatest fulfillment of that idea, whatever that is. And so eights, again, they have tremendous capacity, right? But they also have a lot of stumbling blocks in front of their way.
Well, and I will say it's been great working with you and Tony, who are both twos.
Did you hear that, Tony? Yeah, Tony heard that.
And so, because you guys are continually going, hey, what do you need? What do you need? What do you need? Because, again, I just don't think that way.
That's right.
And interestingly enough, my passion for what really was a church community could be was actually birthed from a four who painted a picture of what a church that tends to be inclusive, embracing, accepting people, working with brokenness and restoration and all of those things, that was actually painted by a four. And so that just shows the power of body, right? And gifts coming together. It helped me.
There you go. You're going to love this. So Peter Yang, he has shared something that I think we can adopt at this stage.
Okay.
And that is eights shall now be known as Shanes. What do you think? We'll just call eights Shanes from now on. We'll contact the Enneagram Institute and we'll just let them know we're going to change eights to just Shanes, and we'll just leave it at that.
Well, dude, I had this, I think I might have told you this as a youth pastor. The reason why I'm laughing is I had this group of leaders in the youth group that were girls, right? And they did this Charlie's Angels pose thing, and somebody called them Shane's Angels. And it was from there on out, they were Shane's Angels.
There you go.
But then I had another group of guys that really weren't leadership quality.
Yeah.
That actually used to call themselves bouncers, right?
Yeah.
And they went and had T-shirts made called Shaniacs. So I guess that's what we could use.
Wow.
The eights could be Shaniacs.
Youth groups are wild places, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
So what about nines, Shane?
Let's move on to nines. So nines, and I have a couple sitting here staring at me right now that are nines.
I have to share something.
Yes.
So in my small group, the one Kayleen and I are a part of, it is dominated by nines.
Oh.
With one number one and a number two.
Okay.
And so it's been very interesting because whenever we as a group talk about what we want to do, everyone just kind of wants to defer to someone else. And the conversation can go on like that for quite a while.
This is going to make total and complete sense.
Tell me more.
To your group. So nines are peacekeepers. And if we're to look at a biblical character, now I'm going to say this, and most people are going to go, wait, what? But as we dig into it, you'll see the peacekeeper out of Scripture is actually Jonah.
Interesting.
Now, we often think of peacekeeping as creating a peaceful world, all of those kind of things, but actually the basic desire of a peacekeeper is to have an inner stability and a peace of mind. So with Jonah, he didn't want to go to the enemies. He didn't want to stir up a lot. He wanted his inner peace and stability. And when God decided to save them, right, that really messed with him, right? Because his stability was broken at that point. And so we see we're hard on Jonah, but I think at the same time, if we put ourselves in Jonah's shoes, we would all maybe have that initial reaction.
That's right.
But then Jonah actually did what he was asked to do. And so I would encourage the peacekeepers, go look at the story of Jonah. Again, your basic desire is to have inner stability and peace of mind. Now, one of the things I love about nines is no other type is devoted to the quest for internal and external peace like nines are. They are devoted to this. They want to see it happen in themselves, but also in the world around them. They want to create a peaceful community. Now, we could probably substitute the word peaceful for harmony.
Yeah, that's a great way of verbalizing it.
Which I think is a really good word. They work to maintain their peace of mind just as they work to establish peace and harmony in the world. They want to create harmony in their environment. Now, to get this, they want to do that to avoid conflicts and tension and to preserve things as they are. So nines maybe aren't the early adapters of change.
So they want harmony, but they don't want conflict.
Exactly.
All right?
And they're not really wanting a lot of change.
Okay.
Right?
So let's leave things as they are.
Yes, exactly.
No one touch anything.
It messes with the internal peace place, right? The routines, all of those kind of things. So I think it's really important that
So whereas 8s love change,
yes,
9s are a little more change adverse,
yes.
you might say.
So 8s and 9s as friends or couples or whatever, I would love to see that as an experiment.
That would be
just
fascinating.
to see how that works out, right? That would be awesome to see who breaks first.
There you go.
But anyway, I think it's incredibly noble to strive for harmony, because harmony is not necessarily unity or unanimity. So one of the things I love about harmony would be this picture of, you know, those dudes that I've never really understood them, but they're in front of the orchestra and they're standing up and they're
Conductors.
yes, and they have their little wands and they're doing their
I think they're just for show. I
Yeah,
don't think they do anything.
because those people are incredible, right? But they
Sure.
have a way of taking all this diversity and blending it into a place of harmony. And that's what I believe about 9s, is they just have this innate ability to bring harmony.
Mhm.
So here's where it gets interesting. 9s, and I think this will go to your group
All right.
somewhat, 9s are chameleons.
Mm,
If they had a spirit animal,
it would be a chameleon.
they would be a chameleon, because like chameleons, not that I'm calling people reptiles, but
That's
even though
good.
we do have a reptilian thing up here, is this idea that they're able to change and blend into environments.
So would that work its way out in the Enneagram as them adopting kind of each number?
Absolutely, 100%. So 9s can have the strength of 8s.
Okay.
They can be have the sense of fun and adventures of 7s. They can have a sense of duty like 6s, that loyalty, and intellectual like 5s, creative like 4s, the attractiveness of 3s, the generosity of you guys, the 2s, and they have the idealisms of 1s.
Interesting.
Now, that's wonderful, because they have the high power of empathy, right? And so they're able to empathize with different people, different groups. They're able to really take on some of that. And so they have this beautiful ability to adapt. But the problem with that is actually rooted in their basic fear. And their basic fear is loss of themselves, right? Losing themselves or being separated from themselves. Because what happens is that these guys blend so wonderfully into communities, and they're able to broker this harmony and take on this profound ability to empathize and to understand where 8s are coming from and 1s are coming from, and even where 2s are coming from.
Right.
That they have the ability to do that, but in that, if they're not careful, they can lose their voice. And so I think the thing that I find that maybe we'll talk more about this week in our midweek video on how we love each different type, is that I think for those of us who are engaged daily with 9s, is to help encourage to hear their voice, actually what they're thinking, and not defer it.
Right.
You know?
They share that very similarly with a 4, right? As we've talked about, 4s are these very unique individuals. 9s are very unique as well, but they mask it so much better, because you so often may interact with a 9 and not necessarily realize that that's what they are, right? Or that they're struggling with an identity, because they do have that capacity to bring on so many different pieces, and a lot of valuable pieces of each type. But again, if they do lose their voice, if they lose that internal 9, they actually can't achieve harmony, because they don't have that piece of themselves that is required for that peace of mind.
And the wonderful thing about 9s, actually, in the Enneagram language, they actually sometimes call them the crown of the Enneagram. And I think what 9s have the innate ability to do is they have the ability to, again, bring harmony. And that's so important, because Paul talks about it all the time through Scripture. You're one body, you know, operating together. But I think one of the things that I think, if left unchecked, is this idea that if everything's okay on the outside, then everything will be okay on the inside. And we just know that that's not true. So for 9s, I would really say, you know what, but really what you think.
Right.
Bring your own voice. And let's deal with the internal, because sometimes the external can look peaceful, but that doesn't mean the inside is.
Right.
So integration, they will move to a healthy 3.
Hmm.
They will be more energetic. They're super self-developing. So they will move towards a 3. Disintegration, this is very interesting. They move to an unhealthy 6.
Yeah.
And anxiety and worry become the profound mitigating factors in their lives.
Yeah.
So because they can't bring harmony to the outside, inside, or to people, they'll tend to retreat, and this anxiety and worry begins to destroy them from within.
Mhm.
So I think it's really important that 9s realize that.
Yeah, that's great. There's 2 comments I want to touch on
Okay.
that are in the chat. Bria or Kyle, one of them had a really interesting comment that it is fascinating that 9s are really great at adapting,
Yes,
but they're also resistant to change.
yes.
And that is actually
That's a beautiful statement. That actually, yes.
and that is actually complementary of a 9. And the reason why they actually adapt so much to the other types is because of that resistance.
Mm-hmm.
If they bring a little piece of this and a little piece of this and a little piece of this, it doesn't actually require them to change. They can find a way to navigate all the other types, all the other relationships around them if they bring in a little bit, but they don't fully adopt it.
Yes.
Right? So allowing themselves a little bit of change is better than a lot of change. That would kind of be the mantra of a 9.
And I think in my mind, not that we just want to ignore the 1s, because we're unfortunately going to have to deal with those guys, because we don't want to talk about our wives up here
not at all.
But
we can just stay on 9s the rest of the day.
I think for me, I think of a 9, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think 9s in my mind, because I think in pictures, are like bridge builders. They're like bridges that bring things together instead of keeping things separate. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's a great way of portraying it, because they do, again, adapting different pieces of different types, they can relate to other Enneagram numbers far better than any other number on the Enneagram itself. So
okay,
that's great. The other thing is,
okay, all right.
Stephanie Lotus asked this. She said, "Are all teenagers 9s?" It's a good question, right?
It is, but that's a whole nother sermon series,
That
bro.
is a whole other sermon series. So really quickly, the answer would be no. Not all teenagers are 9s. The interesting thing about having gone through this series, I've actually been able to hear from a good number of our youth. Some of them have taken the test. Some of them have talked through it with me. And there's youth all across the Enneagram. We're going to probably touch on a little bit of this next week when we go through our Q&A. So make sure you guys are there for that, and we'll probably touch more on that.
Well, the one thing I would just bring to that, and this is something you and I talk about all the time when it comes to young adults and teenagers, is the development of the frontal lobe. So they are still learning. So yes, they'll adapt or they'll shift or whatever, but they're also still developing all of this up here to be able to make decisions and think through who they are.
Exactly. So,
you know,
there we
good
go.
stuff. So, bro, we need to move on to the reformers.
Do we have to?
I'm glad you're talking about this and not me.
You gave me the hard ones today. My goodness. All right, so reformers. Now, when we say reformers, you and I have both had this experience where we went to our spouses and said, "You're a reformer."
Yes.
And they looked at us and said, "No, I'm not."
No, I'm not, which is a 1.
Which is a 1. And then we began to unpack what a 1 is.
Yes.
And talked about how they may have some perfectionist tendencies. And both of them kind of went, "Oh, yeah, okay, that's me."
It was actually funny, dude, because, and I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but Lori, like, she took the test.
Yeah.
She's like, "This is not me." And maybe not in that voice, but that's in my internal mind, and that just escaped. But I remember as she was reading down further into the 1, I'm actually sitting over there laughing. My daughter is sitting there laughing, and Lori's like, "Oh, boy." Yep. Oh, so I just found that as a fun experience. Yes.
So 1s. 1s are very interesting. They are people of practical action.
Yes.
They want to be useful in the best sense of that word. And on some level, they have this consciousness. They feel they have a mission or a purpose to achieve, right? To fulfill in their life. If only to try their best to reduce the disorder that they see in the environment.
Yes.
So 1s are the individuals that look out into the world and they see everything that is wrong that they can fix.
Yes.
And they know how to fix it.
Yes.
And by gosh darn, they're going to go do it.
Which, you know what, made complete sense to me, because every Sunday I would go home and say, "Hey, what did you think about the live stream today?"
Yeah.
There was a lot to fix.
There you go.
Exactly.
So 8s and 1s are a great combination, aren't they?
Yes.
Good answer.
Yes,
there we
they
go.
are.
So, what do reformers or perfectionists, what do they strive for? Well, they want to be right? They want to strive, but they want to strive for these ideals. They want to elevate things. They're very similar to eights in that capacity. They want to get somewhere that isn't here. They want to move past where they are, right? They want to improve things. They want to be consistent with their ideals and to justify themselves, to be beyond criticism so that they can't be condemned by others.
Okay.
And that is a very deep-rooted fear of one's, is a criticism from others. They do have this internal fear that, again, drives their motivation.
Which I think, if we could pause for a second on that, I think it's really important because Paul is the reformer, right? The Apostle Paul.
Yep.
And we can see that all through his writings about being above reproach.
Yep.
Like you can really see his personality coming to bear in what he's writing.
It's all about character.
Yep.
It's all about equality and fairness. They want to have a balanced system.
Yes.
Right?
They want it to be perfect.
Exactly. They
Exactly.
want the ideal.
Okay.
And so they want for people, their communities, themselves, their friends, their families, to be the best possible version of themselves. Right? So for a 1, this is where they differ from an 8 in that they don't want just to internalize that motivation, but they're actually they want that for others.
Yes.
So they may not challenge people the same way, but they are going to be explicit in communicating to others that they want them to improve as well.
Okay.
Now, that might not always come across in the most gentle of manners. It may come across a little rude. It might come across
Matter of fact, maybe.
Matter of fact
Yep,
would be a great way of
yep.
putting it, right? And so they want people to improve. They want themselves to improve. But again, it comes from this basic fear of almost being bad, being wrong, being unbalanced, right? Not being perfect, right? And so their blind spot actually comes in resentment.
Okay.
Because this resentment, it's mainly focused internally. It's focused on themselves.
Okay.
It's not resentment of others so much as it is this resentment leading them to be hard on themselves and keeping themselves in a place where they just beat themselves up.
Okay.
Because they're not achievers and because they're not challengers, they're not always going to get it right.
Okay.
But because that is the one thing they desire more than anything, they start to become hard on themselves. They beat themselves up, and they continually bring themselves back to places of being like, I should have done this better. I should have. Can I tell a story about your wife?
Dude, you can tend to tread wherever you want to.
Perfect.
But just be aware.
This is going to be great. People are on the edge of their seats right now, and I'm sure Lori is yelling at me. But that's okay.
No,
So,
she's going to yell at me. Thank you.
These beautiful panels behind us
Yes.
are wonderful.
Yes.
And we had some incredible volunteers come
Yes.
and string all of them together.
Not those.
Not those ones?
No.
That is because
It got redone.
it got redone. Because as a perfectionist, they can look at something that is creative,
Yep.
that is beautiful, that is worked on, and they will identify flaws and they will fix them.
Yes.
And no one is going to stop them from doing that.
Exactly. But that's one of the things I love about ones is they're not just sitting like crows crowing on top of a wire at everybody or everything.
Yeah.
They actually will say, this is wrong, and I'm going to invest myself
That's right.
in fixing whatever that is.
They are very involved individuals. Ones are actually, they are a lot of individuals in the healthcare system, in the policing, in fire, in any almost government agency. You'll find a lot of ones because they are the ones that just want to see kind of this utopian culture, right? In the back of their heads, that is a driving force because perfection is an ideal to pursue.
Right.
Right? So ones have a lot of interesting attributes to them.
Yes. So real quick, hit the integration, disintegration, and then we'll move on to verses.
Cool. So integration. Ones integrate towards a healthy 7, becoming more spontaneous and joyful. And when they disintegrate, they move to an unhealthy 4, becoming moody and irrational.
Which we never encounter.
Ever.
Because they're
not
healthy,
once.
dude. They're
All the
super
time.
healthy.
Great.
Yes.
Verses.
So, guys, we have some verses for encouragement for you. And for 8s, I know that these types of verses really help me bring things into perspective. So, like Isaiah chapter 52 and verse 12. But you will not leave in haste or go in flight. I love that leave in haste.
That's a good one.
For the Lord will go before you. The God of Israel will be your rear guard. Isaiah 41, verse 10. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you, and I will uphold you with my righteous hand.
That's
Nines.
great. Nines have some good ones. So the first one comes from Ephesians 2:10. It says, "For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." And 1 Peter 1:2 says this, "You were chosen according to the purpose of God the Father, and you were made a holy people by His Spirit, to obey Christ and be purified by His blood. May grace and peace be yours in full measure."
Awesome.
What about ones?
Ones. 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 9. Listen to this. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. Because again, this idea of ones being incredibly hard on themselves. My grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. Psalm 86 and verse 5. You, Lord, are forgiving and good, abounding in love to all who call to you. Because Christ in you, you are good. He makes you righteous.
That's awesome.
Yes.
I really like that.
All right, so we've been talking about this contemplative prayer posture, right?
And ones have maybe the most difficult.
Yes, this one's going to be difficult. So heart types was solitude, head types was silence. For gut types, I think it's tough for all of us.
It is
stillness, okay? We need to practice stillness. Why? Eights, we need to know that it is the Lord who does the work in us and through us. Nines, we need to know that you need to know you're not in control, but the Lord is. So all that pressure of trying to reconcile everything, that's not yours to bear alone, right? It's the Lord's. And so for ones, stillness is huge, because you need to hear God's voice telling you that He's not expecting perfection, but that His strength works most in weakness. So let's finish up. We've been using this filter called Love Requires.
Yep.
And really, this whole teaching series has been really focused on who we are, but then how to bring who we are to bear into creating a better world, a better future, better communities, etc. And so eights, I use the word tenacity. And I think that word in a lot of ways, I think, sums up what eights can bring positively to their community. And I think for us, we need to focus specifically on the passage of Philippians chapter 3. Paul here is talking about forgetting things of the past, striving for a goal, and everything can be sacrificed towards this goal. But at the end is this beautiful piece where he says, and I encourage those of you, come with me.
That's right.
Come with me on this journey. So nines, I would say this idea of mediation and reconciliation absolutely is something that has to be brought. Right now, I'm like thinking in the U.S., is there no nines?
I don't know where they are right now.
Because right now, you don't see them anywhere, man. There's nothing being built, right?
Yep.
And so nines, we need nines. What do we need? Yes. Stop it. Mediation and reconciliation. The premier person I see in this is out of Exodus chapter 18, and it's Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses, an unsung hero. In chapter 18, beautiful. He blesses Moses, and then he watches Moses go do something crazy. Moses is sitting out with all these untold numbers of people, trying to listen to their complaints.
He is acting as judge.
Exactly. And he's trying to figure out how best to help them, kind of like an eight, but he's also hurting himself and them. And Jethro actually comes up with this brilliant plan of, hey, Moses, we can better serve the people by doing this, and you can be better served by this happening. And so it's really a beautiful picture of really mediating between a large group of people and leaders. It's a beautiful picture. And the last one, and then I'm going to let you close this out. Ones, I would tell them to go and look at the entire book of James.
It's a great book.
It is. And I think we need ones to help us set a standard.
Mhm.
We need for them to look at, like beautifully right now as we see in our world, we need mediators and we need ones who can say, here's what the ideal is.
Mhm.
And how do we move towards that? And I think that's what James does. The oldest New Testament book, the first epistle, the first book in the New Testament.
He set the bar.
He did, and he said, this is the standard for what a Jesus follower or a Jesus community would look like. So go and spend some time in the Epistle of James.
Those are some great